Welcome along to the Rock and Goal podcast, and we're very much back to full strength this week for a bumper edition. My name is Fraser Clark, and joining me is the fit again Chris McMillan and our new January edition, Mr. Jack Crawford. We'll also be joined by former Suns boss Stevie Aitken to reflect on a memorable and tumultuous tenure at the Rock. But first we'll look back on the games that have taken place since our last podcast back in early January. And that was a stressful one to record. Firstly, because the podcast machine kept cutting out. Secondly, because both of you called off on me with medical emergencies. And third of all, because there was a pitch inspection taking place for arguably Dumbarton's biggest game of the season whilst I was sat opposite the manager.
How was that for you?
Not as stressful as it was for him. But yeah, I'm very, very glad that we're back to sort of more relaxed circumstances, and barring a freak downpour, Dumbarton will play Annan Athletic today. We'll start by taking a wee look back over the month that was January though, and well, it started in fairly forgettable circumstances up at Station Park in Forfar, in that 2-1 defeat where Suns went down to 10 men after 12 minutes with Ryan McGeever sent off. Ben Armour scored his customary goal and then doubled it to take his career tally to about 50% against Dumbarton. Chris might have that noted down somewhere, and if he doesn't, he will do by the next time we play Forfar, and he's laughing because he does. And Ali Love's penalty, after some jibes from Mark Docherty, which sort of created a bit of beef between them, which was quite entertaining. Half the arrears, but Suns lost out 2-1. Jack, first of all, that Forfar game, how do you reflect on it now a month later?
Well, I wasn't at that one. That's one of the ones I've given missed this season. I was still in my sick bed after my surgery. But going into the game, I just thought it was the type of game that I don't like it at all. The way Forfar were going at that point, they kind of had the new manager bounce. I think we've been quite unlucky in that regard. We keep playing teams that get new managers, and 3-4 weeks in, they're putting a stamp on the team. They're kind of playing to that manager's strengths, and Forfar were at that point. The early red card, as you said, obviously didn't help. We're up against it from there. Just didn't seem to get going. I don't know. I didn't even watch the highlights, to be honest, of that game. I don't know if 2-1 was maybe fortunate for us. Could it have been more? Or
yeah, I think 2-1 was probably about the best possible outcome in that game, to be fair. I mean, Suns maybe could have snatched something, but I think if Forfar had won that game 3-0, 3-1...
no complaints.
I don't think there would have been too many complaints. They actually did score a third goal, sort of, because as the final whistle went, Nathan Flanagan launched one from halfway, and Brett Long obviously the final whistle had pretty much been blown, so he wasn't paying full attention, and it actually went over his head and into the net as the full-time whistle was blown. Brett won't thank me for mentioning that one, but if you watch the highlights, just skip right to the end, and I think it's Nathan Flanagan just, like, as the referee blows his whistle, he just launches one from the halfway line right into the back of the net. So
that goal could be so crucial coming in the season, goal difference and all that. Imagine
if we win the league by one goal, and Stirling Albion are going to be looking for that referee. Chris, from your point of view, you obviously saw Forfar here in November, very early after the Ray McKinnon appointment, and they held Suns to that 2-2 draw. First of all, they seem somewhat of a bogey team for Dumbarton, but second of all, just how impressed have you been by Ray McKinnon since he came in?
Well, first of all, I should say, I'm looking at Ben Armour for you here and those stats on the goals, and where are we? I think, here we go.
He scored a couple for Peterhead as well, didn't he, against us?
5 goals in 7 games, and 2, 4, 6, 7, 8 elsewhere. Yeah.
So
13 career goals and 5 against Dumbarton.
And they've all been in victories as well.
Yeah, that's correct. That is absolutely ridiculous. But
how many for Dumbarton last year here?
Would that be a big round number?
But it's not unexpected, as you said. A bogey team. Like I didn't get to really speak about the Forfar game that we watched here when it was a draw, and because I missed that podcast as well, and I didn't really know what to expect. I've not seen as much of them as you, but I mean, it was so long ago. I can actually barely remember the game.
We gifted them a goal, didn't we? McCluskey put it in, and
sort of gifted
a rare mess at the back.
That's right.
Yeah.
That was odd, that wasn't it? Yeah. It was like, it almost felt like Dumbarton just kind of like threw that one away. And I remember that McCluskey goal, and I remember stood there, and when I was commentating, and I was just like, how on earth? Where did that come from? How did that happen? She almost just sort of like looked up, and then he was, 1 yard up with an open goal just to tap in. But so it was a difficult one, but when you get a new manager coming in, and he's probably, by his, I would imagine his opinion, he's taken a bit of a step down to come here and get this team going again. And they've certainly done that, but I think from a Dumbarton perspective, like we've spoken about it as well, like even if it is a bogey team, like they're going to lose games before the end of this season, and it's just about putting that behind them and getting on with it, which I think they've obviously done coming back into the league business as well. So
I think all the wins apart from one have just been by the odd goal, so they can only keep up you for so long. You're going to get caught out eventually if you keep winning by the odd goal. So obviously, but the form they're on, it's lucky they came in a bit later than they did, otherwise it'd be a 3-horse race, maybe the top league rather than a 2-horse race.
My bold prediction, which we like doing on this podcast, is that Forfar Athletic will finish no lower than 3rd place this season. I really think they've got a manager who knows what he's doing, who's hugely unpopular in Greenock and hugely unpopular in Falkirk, but those aren't necessarily bad things, but given the sort of difficulty those clubs are to manage. But I've been really, really impressed by Ray McKinnon. I've always quite liked him as a manager. Chris rearranges the crockery that we have with us here, the silverware. I've always quite liked Ray McKinnon as a manager. I thought he did an excellent job at Wraith Rovers going back, that'd be 6-7 years ago now. And it feels like teams in this league, any team, I think, such a cliche, but any team can beat any team on their day in this league. And we've seen that right throughout the season. But I think Forfar have found that formula that Suns and that Stirling Albion have got, where they know how to grind out results and they know how to get over the line and they know how to basically put wee runs together. And how many times did we say in commentary that Dumbarton, it wasn't that Dumbarton last season needed to win 9 straight games, they needed a run of maybe 6 games, 3 wins, 3 draws, and just build a bit of momentum up. Forfar have done that now. And
you mentioned with the league, you don't think they've finished what did you say, any lower than 3rd?
I think 3rd will be the lowest.
3rd will be the lowest, but I mean, I think I could say that's not that hot a take. Like below Stirling Albion and Dumbarton, it is quite congested. You see it with today's opponents with Annan, like just string together 2-3 wins, I think, in a row, and all of a sudden you're sitting in 3rd. And you're right. We said it, and it's the case, as I just said, proved by Annan. Like you just need to keep putting together these like mini runs, less than mini runs. And you'll be all right. And they're probably in a position where if they can do that to the end of the season, if they can finish 3rd, 4th, get in the playoffs, build a bit of confidence, and then you get to go next season.
I know that it's probably skewed by the fact that Dumbarton haven't beaten them this season, but if Forfar end up in the playoffs and they can keep this momentum going, I fancy them massively for the playoffs, even if they come up against Suns or Stirling Albion, because I think whichever one of Dumbarton and Stirling Albion finishes 2nd, assuming that it stays as tight as it is,
they're going to be so deflated.
It'll be a massive deflation for Forfar. I mean, December time they were right 9th, 10th in the league. To get into the playoffs, they'll then, almost like Dumbarton did in 2011-12, there's nothing to lose now. We've got the momentum. We believe that we're a good enough team to do this. And, with the sort of, in the nicest way possible, the state of Peterhead and Clyde at the moment, I think any team finishing the playoffs in League 2 will fancy their chances.
They've got a really good mix of players for I think, as well. Just looking at their squad, they've got Mark Dockett, as you said, Kyle Hutton, Andy Monroe, Craig Slater, Stephen McCluskey, loads of experience, but they've got the youth in there as well, kind of similar to Dumbarton, and I think they signed quite well in January with Seb Ross, who's got a couple of goals already. So Ray McKinnon will get the best out of players like that. I think that experience is so crucial, especially at League 2 level.
We've talked a lot about Forfar, but this is a Dumbarton podcast, and despite the fact that I do own a Baxter the Bridie toy, we won't stick with Forfar for too much longer. We'll look a wee bit at Dumbarton. And just one last thing to touch on from that game was obviously Ryan McGeever's early red card. He's now gone off on loan to Clyde, and a move that I think everybody I've spoken to, and my own words in the paper, is a move that just makes sense for everyone.
It does. Clyde are getting a really experienced player who's played at a higher level than they are at the moment, than we are at the moment, and we're getting a player who's won this league, I think it was last season, the season before, so he's been there, done it. Obviously we've got a fit centre half coming in as opposed to Ryan McGeever, who's obviously, we know how talented he is, but he's been struggling since his injury to just get that on the games, because the back line for Dumbarton has been so good this season. It's not fair and it's impossible to disrupt that when you're doing so well. So it makes sense to bring in Peter Grant. The only thing is, and we'll touch on it a bit more when we get to the Steny game, I wonder if we'll see kind of him thrown on for the last 5 minutes a bit more. We never seen that much for Ryan McGeever, just because I don't feel Faster he was fit enough to throw him on for periods like that. But I wonder if going to kind of back 5 when they're trying to grind out a 1-goal victory, we might see that a bit more in the weeks ahead.
And Chris, obviously, like when you first came in, your first season in commentary was the COVID season, obviously, and that was the Morgan Neal, Ryan McGeever, almost impenetrable fortress at the back. Like the two of them were absolutely phenomenal that season. how optimistic are you that next season we'll see Ryan McGeever? He's still under contract at Dumbarton, he's still club captain, he can come and be a big player again.
Yeah, I was thinking that it's one of those things in football, isn't it? You can never see the future, and you don't know how it's going to go, and it can change so quickly. Like, we spoke to him at the end of last season, and he was like so happy to remain here. He'd already signed a new contract when he didn't know what division Dumbarton were going to be playing in, and I think he was happy about that. And yeah, he's just struggled with the injury. Faz has found a system when he's come down. He's moved Carswell back into centre back, and you know, as a manager and as a player for Carswell, like, neither of them have looked back, and when you're in that position, when you're on the sidelines with an injury and the manager just finds a system that works, it's so difficult to get back in.
Especially in that area of the park. It's an area you don't want to be chopping and changing every week.
And there's been no real injury, and like you said, he's not really been tempted to, you know, drop to a back five and throw on an extra centre half to get him a few more minutes. That maybe, if that was the case closer to the start of the season, that might have helped perhaps with the fitness in the long run. But it's just the way it goes, really. And yeah, it would be interesting to see where he sees himself next season. But you know, speaking for myself, like, I'd like to see him back. But
yeah, no matter what league we're in, I'd like to see him back, and we know he can play at that level. So hopefully, I know he played. I think he got back an hour last week for Clyde. Obviously, as you say, Duffy knows him well. So hopefully it's a move that works for everyone.
After defeat at Forfar came defeat to Kilmarnock in the sort of heartbreaking circumstances that we're quite used to at Derek McInnes' teams. It's funny, I was at Rugby Park, sat up the back in the press box, and the Kelly boy beside me was going absolutely mental. I just turned around and said, "Don't worry, you'll score in the last 5 minutes. Derek McInnes' teams always do this to us." And I've been in the Aberdeen, you know, the main stand at Pittodrie when they've been in that sort of similar situation, fans going mental, and I just go, "I know what's coming. I know what's coming." You don't believe it's coming, but it is. It always happens. But a real... it was a sore one to take at the end, but after a really, really good performance, and not only did Suns defend as well as you have to do in a game like that, they also had chances of their own.
We did, very good chances. Obviously the one with Greg's the one that will stand out. I know he was offside. I spoke to Farrell the day after the game, and he said Greg misses it because he's offside. If he's 2 yards back the way, that's the way the ball comes to him, it's bounced, and he obviously misses the target for 6 yards or whatever. But as you say, the chance with Wilson as well, obviously goalie makes a great save, so really proud of the performance. Farrell was as well. Even though you get beat, performance like that can really help you through the course of the season. Yeah,
I was just going to say that as well. Like, maybe it's in that type of situation, it's maybe more about the performance than the result. When you're flying at the flying is maybe a bit rich at the minute, but when you're top of the league, you're grinding out results. You just want to keep that going. You just want to see something, especially against a top flight team. You just want to see the performance and realise that you don't want to get battered. Basically, you don't want anything that might dent confidence or like have any doubts creeping into the way that you're going about your business. And that's kind of what it felt like to me. And yeah, you lose right at the death. It happens, but. Probably more positives to take from it, really.
4 seasons I know we've lost by the odd goal to Premier League teams. So unlucky.
Think about how sweet it will be when it changes.
in 2037 or something like that. Just a couple of performances from that I wanted to touch on, actually. First was Martin McNiff, and I think over the past month or so, Martin McNiff has probably been one of Dumbarton's best players. And I thought at Rugby Park, up against Daniel Armstrong, who's a tremendous player, he was Kelly's biggest threat all day. I thought Martin McNiff was absolutely tremendous, and that comes on the back of that goal line clearance at Clifton Hill, where there's that brilliant picture of him basically upside down on the goal line. I thought he was solid up at Forfar, and then in recent weeks as well he's been really, really good. So I don't know, some people, McNiff isn't going to bomb forward.
No, and he's not the modern day fullback.
No, he's going to say that. He's not going to be, battering over the halfway line and getting crosses in. But I think defensively he has been absolutely superb in recent weeks.
And he knows that as well, which is good. He's not bombing on and getting caught out at the back. So we talked about the one mistake he's maybe made this season, the goal we gifted to Forfar earlier on. But he knows his strengths, he knows his weaknesses, he's kind of experienced enough and mature enough to know what he's good at and what maybe he's not got the legs that he used to have when he was back as a youngster. But he's had his critics maybe a bit harsh. Folk have maybe been looking at him and not giving him enough praise as what he deserves. But fair play to him, he had a great game up at Kelly. I think Danny Armstrong had a great game against Rangers a few days before, and just seeing how quick he was up against McNiff, you naturally do think, he's going to have him on toast here, but no, McNiff stood up to him really well all day. Brilliant performance.
It's helpful to be part of that defensive unit as well. Like, excuse me, that we mentioned there with it's ended up, McGeever leaving. But that defence, that back five has just been so consistent, and he's been able to pick that every week, and that's only going to help you as well. Like, it's the only area that there's not really had to be any sort of massive, rejigging at any point, really. Like, we've seen it up front with like Declan and Gemmel's injury and stuff like that in midfield. Like, Gray's had a spell out, and McKee. There's just been a bit of change, but that back five is just solid, and that's only going to help you.
Interesting you touch on the striker situation as well, because the other player that I sort of had to mention from the past month, or the other player I want to mention, especially in relation to the Kelly game, is Ryan Wallace. Now, the goals aren't flowing for Ryan Wallace, which will be the one thing that's frustrating him, but I think every other aspect of his game is there. His hold-up play has been great. He's defended well from the front. He looks incredibly fit. He looks a threat. It's just that final bit and sticking the ball.
He deserves to have more goals than he does this season. I think he's got 1 or 2.
He's got 3, I think. Yep.
He deserves to have more than that. He runs his socks off for the team, and players like that are so important to create space for others. I think that's why you see the likes of David Wilson and Finlay Gray finding it so much. We've got smart players up front. Guys like Declan later on the season, now Ryan Wallace just came in. They'll chase defenders. They'll leave space for midfielders to run into. Hopefully today is the day that Wallace gets his goal, because he does deserve something.
Yeah, I've actually had that written down before today about Wallace. So 1 goal in the last 17 league games. Last goal up at Elgin City in early November. And yeah, I'm with you. I think he's been playing well. He's done everything but, and he's got those assists, and he's smart, and he's hassling players. He's a nuisance, isn't he? But what I've got written down here is, like, you've got Declan Byrne fit again. Russell McLean's come in. Does he need that goal? Does he need that goal to stay in? Yeah. You would imagine Russell McLean's going to get a start at some point, just to see him from the start and see what he can do and give him a chance. Exactly. Will he feel that breath in the back of his neck, and will that spur him on to maybe find the net? But I just think it's an interesting one. It crossed my mind before today, and that's why I'd written it down.
Or do we go 2 up top again after the last time we tried?
I was you took the words out of my mouth. So anybody who's been on Pine Bovril this week will have seen so much debate and so much conversation last week at Ockleview as well about when does Stevie Farrell go 2 up front? Because you look at the options he's got up there now. So he's got Ryan Wallace, he's got Declan Byrne, and he's got Russell McLean. Now
you could also play Ross off as well.
Yep.
And you could play Ali Love up front. We've seen Ross McLean up front.
How much do you fancy 2 of those? And any club in the division probably would take at least one of those players and go, I fancy him up front for me.
Would you put Ryan Blair in a 2? Or would you, because obviously the 4-1-4-1 is that's the main formation that's been working, and Blair's quite a big part of that.
Yeah.
What would you do in that situation?
I have no idea. I'm just a volunteer.
I thought for us
I'm just a volunteer podcast host. I don't get paid the big bucks to manage.
Sorry, I thought you had a plan.
No, I have no plan at all, because my only experience would be on Football Manager, and if my team's winning, I don't tend to change formation just because I fancy putting 2 strikers.
We're starting to get the wee green things that you get when the players link up there.
I love playing 2 up top on Football Manager.
I normally do.
Well, the way I look at it as well, if you play 2 up top on Football Manager, if you only play 1, if he has a bad game, you might not score if you've got 2. See? Genius.
Stevie Farrell, are you listening to Chris McMillan? We've obviously talked a wee bit about Martin McNiff, we've talked a wee bit about Ryan Wallace, but we'll talk about January's C&G Systems Player of the Month, who is Greg Wild, and the perfect time to talk about that is that fantastic goal he scored against Bonnyrigg with his right foot after, we won't dwell on the miss at Kelly, but after that miss, to then go and score a goal with that quality on a dodgy pitch with your weak foot. That was a great goal. I loved it.
Must have felt so good, that connection. Must have felt so good. It looked so clean. It wasn't that far out, fair enough, but yeah, lovely strike. And a little ray of sunshine in a pretty gloomy game.
That game was not easy on the eye, and that's putting it mildly. The pitch, I think, caused quite a few problems. And Jack, from your point of view, is there a concern there about the pitch? This is a Suns team that I think the best performance of the season, as far as I'm concerned, would be Clyde away on that big, wide, slick Astro pitch. Is there a concern about the pitch here if it does start to get, towards last season's levels, that it might end up stifling some of those creative players we talked about?
Yeah, I've not been out in the park today, so I'm not sure what the current situation is, but as you say, that Bonnyrigg game, it was starting to get caught up already. I know Rangers were here midweek, it was Tuesday or Wednesday, so you'd imagine it's not going to be in the best shape. We've had okay weather this week, it should be okay, but it's getting into kind of the end of this month, and next month we've got 5 home games out of 6 in the space of about 2.5 weeks. It just happened this time.
Great news for commentators that who will not be leaving the house other than for those 5 home games out of 6. And the Bonnyrigg game also brought about another positive, and it is something we've kind of touched on, but that was the return of Declan Byrne to the bench. Declan Byrne is still Dumbarton's top scorer, I think I'm right in saying, this season, as Chris consults the notes. He has 5 this season, if that helps.
So does Ali Love and Gregor Buchanan.
That's fine, so he is technically still Dumbarton's top scorer, despite the fact he's not kicked a ball since October. We talked about the struggles of fitting them in, but having a player in who's scored so many goals early in the season, including 2 against today's opponents and Athletic, that again is a further boost to Dumbarton before we get into talking about Russell McLean.
Absolutely. Sorry, I don't know who you're going for. We've seen how Declan can finish it. He's probably, is it maybe actually the most clinical striker we've got?
No, I think that's
he runs his socks off as well. He's not the biggest, but he uses his height quite well, I think, what he's got of it. Hopefully same as so when you've got Russell McLean as well and you're only playing one up front, how do you fit? How do you keep 3-4 strikers happy? That's kind of for us just now. We'll be interested to see how he kind of sorts that out.
Especially like when you're talking about potentially going 2 up front, I was thinking about this when you mentioned it, because you looked at that Bonnyrigg game, and especially at the start in that sort of first 20 minutes or so, it was such an odd setup. You know, Dumbarton seem to like to flood forward on the front foot anyway. We've seen it on more than one occasion this season when Suns have got the ball and they're going forward, and there's almost like a line of 4, sometimes 5, just like pushing forward against that back line. So, you know, you're committing bodies forward anyway, and perhaps then that wouldn't be that much of a difference if you are playing 2 up top, because the start of that game was bizarre. We mentioned it as well, like it just felt that it was like a Suns back 4 and then like a front 5 and Bonnyrigg had a back 5 and like a front 4 and like Ryan Blair was just kind of standing about just being like what's going on?
Why is this happening? And then at times Bonnyrigg sort of switched to just like an 8-0-2, and they just had Ali Ufai and Kevin Smith up front and then everybody behind the ball. And I mean, don't get me wrong, the pitch was not in a condition to play in midfield, but that game was an awful match to watch for large spells of it, because it was just so weird. And I think here's another hot take: you can't have a good game of football if both midfields aren't playing well or aren't involved, because your midfielders are probably your best footballers in the team, and the midfielders on either side, none of them could really get involved in that game. It just bypassed them, and that was probably why it was such a tough watch. I
think it's probably the most, we've had a lot of ugly wins this season. I think it's probably the most convincing 1-1 we've had. There was no moment in that game where you felt Bonnyrigg were going to score, as you say, because they were all over the shop. There wasn't really a shape to them, and they had nobody on the park that you thought, we need to kind of keep an eye on him. He's capable of a bit of magic. Look at Albion Rovers and stuff, and even last week they had loads of guys in the park, and you think you're almost asking for it sometimes when you've got guys that talented on the park.
There was no real moment where
there was no ball across the face of goal that anything could have happened.
We've seen in a few of those victories by the odd goal that Brett Long's had to make 1 or 2 like really good stops, and that wasn't really the case against Bonnyrigg.
If that wasn't the case against Bonnyrigg, then it felt like it was only a matter of time until it was the case against Denhouse-Muir, and it did arrive. It was their first shot on target. It was in the 5th minute of injury time, and I am completely over it, as you can tell from this. But that 1-1 draw last week, I guess slightly tempered by the fact that East Fife held Stirling Albion as well, so no harm done. I mean, the situation hasn't changed. Is that a missed opportunity, or is that one that you fear at the end of the season we might be looking at and thinking, if we just held on for those additional 30 seconds?
If you'd equalise midway through the second half, you're probably looking at it as it's a good point, but because of when they scored it felt like a defeat after the game. I would rather have had our point than Stirling's point, if that makes sense. I think our point away to Irn Bru is a better point than a point away to East Fife. Both teams going to very different levels of form at the moment, so on the face of it, we stayed 4 points ahead at the top of the league. I think it was a good day all around. It had to be, all things considered.
I was going to say, just sort of from a different sort of perspective, like I noticed that Stevie Farrell mentioned the 4 point gap in the build up to this game, and I don't know if I'm right, I could be wrong, but it just kind of felt like that was the first time that had really been mentioned. And I think the Stirling Albion game is looming in the background, and it's on people's minds. But you say it felt like a defeat, and you can understand why it always does when you concede in the last minute. But when you are front running, like, it feels like that quite a lot. And 2 wins in 4, 3 of which have been away games, like, that's fine. When you're at the top of the league and you're going and you're being chased, that record is okay. And sometimes people can look at it and the glass is half empty sort of thing. And but a point away at Steny in that situation is not bad. It's the way it comes around and it stings.
This is obviously a big week in the title fight as well, because one of Stirling Albion, well, they're not playing today. They don't seem to ever play on Saturdays. It seems to be like a really rare thing. But they are playing on Valentine's Day, so all the Stirling Albion fans can treat their missuses or their misters to a trip to Bonnyrigg and New Dundas
surely
Park.
Something very poetic about Bonnyrigg Rose winning on Valentine's Day. There's got to be.
There is actually. I think that's lovely. You would expect, based on what we've seen from the two teams, that Stirling Albion will have enough. That then conceivably could close the gap, depending on what happens today. And this is the difficulty with recording, as all these games are built up. Could close the gap as close as 1 point. Does that worry you in any way? Because we've seen Dumbarton fall behind and then very quickly claw themselves back to the top of the league.
It's always easier to chase as well. But as I just mentioned there, that game is playing on my mind, so I imagine it must be on everyone's.
Yeah, the manager and father come out and say, we're not thinking about it, we're only looking at ourselves. I think we've all been in this game long enough to know that's just not the case. We're all looking at the results as soon as they come off the park and seeing what's happened elsewhere. So if you'd fancy them to go to Bonnyrigg and get 3 points on Tuesday, but going there on a Tuesday night, it's maybe not the nicest places to go. It'd be cold, the park's not the best, as we've seen first hand this season as well, so it's not a nice away game, one you'd probably expect them to come to.
But they will drop points before the end of the season, as Dumbarton will as well.
Yeah.
And
that leads us quite nicely actually on to talking about the January transfer window, and I think that January can always be a difficult time for clubs as well, because how many times do you see a new signing come in, make an immediate difference, and then do absolutely nothing for the rest of the time? You see it quite a lot. But one of the major moves isn't a move in, it's a move out, and that's at Stirling Albion have lost Kai Fotheringham. Now, for those of you who remember the certain game at Forth Bank that I don't, it's just completely gone from my mind. I'm led to believe he had a really good game that day, and in fact, and in fact has been playing really well this season, but I've managed to scrub him from my mind. But that looks on paper like a really big blow to Stirling Albion.
It does, and they only got a point last week, as we touched on, and that's the kind of game you want guys like that in. You expect them to, a bit of moment of magic, a corner, as we've seen first hand at Forth Bank. I think they scored from 4 corners or something, yeah, and he took them all. So we know how technically gifted he was. Obviously the move came at a great time for Dumbarton, as I think it caught Stirling off guard.
Caught me off hand.
Well, yeah, because I think they were given reassurance that no, you've got Kai for the rest of the season. So I'm not sure what's went on at Tannadice for them to kind of force them to recall him. But obviously, from a Dumbarton perspective, it's great news. He's won him a lot of points this season. Not necessarily scoring a lot of goals, but I think he's probably not far off double figures for assists. So delighted to see you back, to be honest.
Yeah, I'll tell you. Before the planned game on the 7th, had 13 league goal involvements and 13 league starts. So just a massive player to lose for them going into it, and that'll affect the creativity massively. You would imagine in the service, because they are the most potent attack in the league. But you take a big cog out of that machine, and it's only gonna grind a little bit, isn't it? So
he was the Dom Thomas in their team, which will lead us on to our Stevie Aitken discussion when he arrives actually. But he was very much, in my eyes, the player who looked like he was playing way below his level. He probably should be playing top half of League One or maybe Championship. And I hope, as much as I'm delighted he's been recalled, I hope that he doesn't go back to Dundee United and just sit on the bench and play like 14 minutes between now and the end of the season. I hope if they're recalling him, they're actually going to play him, because if they don't, what's the point? You've got a young guy who could have a league winners medal, who could play a huge part in that, and you've taken him out of that to sit him in the stand and maybe fling him on for 5 minutes at the end of a defeat to Ross County or something.
Because the wording was quite interesting when they called him. It was to further aid his development or something like that. The tweet said, so you'd imagine it would to play football. What the situation was, I'm not sure, whether he was training with Dundee United during the week still and going with Stirling twice a week, whatever the situation was.
If there's anything that has caught anybody else's eye though in the January transfer window, and something that got me massively excited, was Dumbarton bringing in Russell McLean. Russell McLean effectively tore Dumbarton to shreds last season for Peterhead, and I couldn't believe it. It's the first time in a wee while that we've signed a player that I looked on the website and thought, oof, hang on a minute here. Like
it's a good feeling, isn't it?
It's a really good feeling. I had to sort of refresh it a few times to make sure he didn't have a namesake who was like, 17 and on loan from Hearts or something. But the real actual Russell McLean is at Dumbarton. He's obviously been out for a huge amount of time, but a player who at Montrose, at Forfar during that brief loan spell, and at Peterhead last season especially, has always caused Dumbarton problems, and caused Morgan Neal problems in the air when he smashed him in the face.
He did. He's a big boy, isn't he? He's another option to have as well. Obviously, we've got Ryan and Declan, as we've touched on, who obviously is a different kind of. If you want to change the way you're playing, you can go along to him and you play off him. So he needs a run of games. That's interesting. So we've seen Ryan McGeever go out to get some games. How's he going to get Russell McLean games? We'll need to see.
Yeah, because he won't have come here to sit on the bench and come on for 15-20 minutes. That's you would imagine that he believes, and he is good enough to play at this level, score goals at this level. We've already seen it, and above, and he'll want a chance, and he will get one at some point.
How impressed were you by him against Bonnyrigg? That was the first time you got to see him in Suns colours, and he came on that day, and
I wasn't impressed by much.
In a pretty woeful game, he just added something a bit different.
Yeah, definitely, he did well when he came on. He did what he needed to do, but I don't think that's the role that he'll want to play. I would like to see him from the start, and yeah, hopefully I will at some point. I've said it like 3-4 times already now, but I think we will. But yeah, I was impressed with him. But it was more the Gemmell role, wasn't it? But
the defend from the front sort of role and try and win free kicks and bully people about.
Yeah, exactly. But I think we were done by that point, really.
I just wanted to go home. I was cold, it was pouring, the pitch was awful, the game had bored me. I was very ready to go home by that stage. It did sort of spruce things up a wee bit.
I think we had a bounce game during the week there, or the week before, so hopefully guys like Russell and Declan and other guys coming back from injury kind of got some minutes in their legs there, and we'll see that when they come off the bench.
You see, maybe Stevie Farrell's just trying to figure out which two it is.
Yeah, you see, he needs a game, was what he said about Declan Byrne the other week.
He did, yeah.
That would make a bit of sense. Just to wrap up, it was quite a quiet January window looking round about. Just a couple of things that caught my eye that I wanted to touch on. The first is Albion Rovers keeping Charlie Riley, who was also named Cinch League 2 Player of the Month again, and very much deservedly so. And the second one was Scott Agnew coming out of retirement to sign for East Fife. I'll start with Charlie Riley though, because we've spoken about him a wee bit on the podcast, and I'm always very, very happy to sort of give praise to other players who catch my eye. Nobody has caught my eye, I don't think, in this league more than Charlie Riley this season. He looks an absolutely wonderful player. He's like Gareth Bale when he gets going. His finishing can be a bit erratic, but he seems to have worked on that this season, and I think he's a player who's going to go on to huge things.
It was just his fitness really that was a bit of a question when we saw him here earlier on in the season, because I hadn't seen him before that game, and even before that game it was earlier on, and his stats were already eye-catching, and I was like, alright, okay, let's have a look at it. Like, his stats were to the point of like, how is this possible without assisting yourself? His numbers were that big, but yeah, he looked at a really fabulous player, and he's continued on, and it was just that question mark about his fitness after that. I think it was that first hour, and he looked knackered. And if he can work on that as well, if you said he's worked on his finishing, if he can work on his fitness as well, he will comfortably move up the levels.
I think he scored here earlier in the season.
He did, yeah.
And he gave a torrid time on New Year's Eve up at Clifton Hill as well. So you do see a big thing for him. A full-time move, probably what he's got his eyes on in summer. I think he'll be the difference between kind of Albion Rovers finishing bottom and not finishing bottom. As we said about Bonnyrigg, there was nobody in the Bonnyrigg team who you could kind of feel we're going to score a goal at an Aston, but with Charlie Riley you'd think Albion Rovers have always got that kind of at their disposal.
One of the most vicious strikers of a ball as well that I've seen. I actually watch Albion Rovers highlights purely to see the way that he scores his goals, because he very rarely scores a bad goal, because he just hits the ball like he absolutely despises it and he's kicking the life out of it, and I love that.
The one here was quite like that. He just battered it low, hard. Not necessarily accurate, but if it's low and hard, you've got a pretty good chance, don't you?
He absolutely loves that kind of lashed finish, which is great. And I suppose on the opposite side, a far more cultured left foot will say is Scott Agnew coming out of retirement. He had been assistant manager at Wraith. He'd retired far too early for me and you, because he's a player that we grew up admiring. I had a 10 in the back of my shirt from his first season at the club in tribute to Aggie, and he knows how much I think he's fantastic, and is probably slightly uncomfortable with it, which is fine, because hopefully it'll put him off playing well when we play East Fife in a couple of weeks. But yeah, Aggie coming out of retirement, good to see, but also he looks like something that maybe East Fife needed, was just a wee bit more quality, and above all else, a bit of experience, a good guy to have around the place.
Yeah, and you've got a guy with his left foot, you're always capable of scoring from corners, and you've seen him score 1 or 2 free kicks as well. Bit of a strange move, because there was some sort of, he was linked for the job, then didn't go because of the way it was, and then whatever's happened there. But yeah, he was far too talented and far too young to retire when he did. So hopefully it's a good spell at East Fife, but just not when they're playing us.
Yeah, as long as he kind of refrains
the classic caveat there, yeah.
refrains from the free kick that he obligatory had to score against us for East Fife over the past couple of years. That rounds up this section. Join us in part 2, where we will be joined by former Suns boss Stevie Aitken to look back on his time at the club, which was, I think I described it in the intro as tumultuous and memorable, which would just about sum things up. As those of you who are watching on the stream will now know, we are joined by our fourth amigo today, which is former Suns boss Stevie Aitken. Stevie obviously took over at Dumbarton alongside Stevie Farrell back in 2015, managed the team for a few seasons in the Championship, led Suns to the Cup final, and we won't touch on how it ended. But we will look back on, I described it as a tumultuous time at Dumbarton. It was a lot of highs and some lows in there as well. But let's jump right back to the start, Stevie, and first of all, thanks for joining us as well. But talk me through how you got the Dumbarton job alongside Stevie Farrell back in May 2015.
Well, we finished the season with Stranraer. We had a really good year. I think Morton picked us for the title in the last game of the season. So we had 3 years when we took Stranraer basically from virtually nothing, very little finances, no training facility, and took them from there to nearly going to the Championship. So we're really building something really good there, and the call came, and the chairman of the Stranraer phoning me and saying Dumbarton want to speak to you. And my initial thing was like, I appreciate that, but I'm really want to build something at Stranraer. I just feel that next year, the year of maybe try and get the Championship, because we can see what Dumbarton had been doing in previous years, part-time playing the Championship, and I want to take Stranraer to that. Then I thought about it overnight and spoke to a few people and said, look, it's too good opportunity, go and speak to him. So I went and met Gilbert, unfortunately no longer with us, and had a really good chat with him, and but then I started thinking, you know what, this is a really good opportunity. Met the board, and before I knew it I was appointed manager. So yeah, listen, it was the right move to do at the time. But you look back and think, did they make the right move at the right time? But it certainly was at the right time that Dumbarton Championship competed against the big clubs, and that's one to be involved in.
It did seem like a pretty natural step up for you, coming from a part-time team in the league below to coming to a part-time team in the league above.
Yeah, I think that I've only done that to do come to Dumbarton, because Dumbarton at that time we were the best part-time team in Scotland. And all the part-time clubs you look at, you're thinking, is it a progression, is it a step up? And leaving Stranraer when in League One, going for the Championship, there wasn't many opportunities I think that would have left Stranraer for. But when Dumbarton came, you see what Ian Murray had done for a couple of years, and he wanted to try and keep that going, and it was a no-brainer at the end up. And once I spoke to people and thought about it, then it was the right move, and I'm delighted I did make it.
It must have been a tempting time as well. You mentioned the big clubs that were in and around the Championship at that time.
It was a scary opportunity as well, because I looked at it and I spoke to people and said, right away, think Dumbarton and then the Championship, and you look at the clubs in it, that's a hard job, but you always want a challenge. You always want to try and test your against the best, and that was, to put a part-time team in the Championship, and Dumbarton had it for 5-6 years, and you can see what both are doing now. It's one of the biggest challenges in Scottish football, and nobody really understands how hard it is when you've got guys like for 3 hours a week compared to teams with 3 hours a day. When we were competing really well, so but it was a tough challenge, but one that I realised and look back on and fond memories.
I still think it's incredible looking back that Dumbarton were in the same league as Rangers, the same league as Hibs, same league as Dundee United, the season before the same league as Hearts, Hibs and Rangers and Livingston, who obviously at the time were struggling a wee bit but are now an established Premier League club. Like you say, how people don't appreciate that Rangers have Murray Park, which is £10 million training development. They'll have the best of sports science, the best of nutrition, and you've got guys for an hour and a half a week on half a pitch sometimes. Yeah.
No, it's challenging, and that's reality, is what you're saying is true, and that's what happens. When you're training half a pitch with another team at the bare back, boys are working, get held up in traffic, trying to get to training, and we were competing with these clubs on a regular basis, and even in terms of budgets, and what the clubs have got at their disposal, it's massive amount compared to what we had at the bar or any part-time team, you know. And that's when you look at just now, we're both what they're doing. It's great to that Campbell over there, because they're doing what Dumbarton done for years. So, but it really was challenging, you know. But I think as players and management, you want to try and test against the best. And as you said, the mentioned teams, we were going there and competing really well, you know, winning games and drawing games there, you know. And it was, looking back now, it was a terrific time.
Your first sign, or one of your first signings, is a player who's still here. He's been about since then, but that was Gregor Buchanan that you brought in. Now, at the time, that was a kind of interesting signing, because he was part of a Dunfermline team that had struggled a bit in League One. You gave him that step up, step back into part-time football, but a step up to the second tier. Talk to me about Gregor Buchanan as a young defender and working with him, because he went on to be a fantastic player for you.
You know, he was excellent, and we actually was trying to sign him for Stranraer. So in the league we'd done really well when Morton just picked us Dunfermline in that league. So Dunfermline and Morton, there's good teams in it. Deacon City were going under, Ray McKinnon were going really well. You know, and we challenged really well. And that year against Dunfermline we done really well. But Gregor was like kind of standout. So when we finished the season off, we say, look, let's go and try and win it next year. Who we're going to try and get? We're going to get Gregor Buchanan. So I actually met him and his dad to sign for Stranraer, and they were close to doing it. When I got the job at the Barton, the very first person I phoned was Greg. I said, look, just hold off. I says, because this might be happening. You know, so it was a no-brainer for me to come and take him, because I knew he could play at that level comfortably, and he did. And he's had a great career. You know, he's been terrific, and he's a good family about him as well. He's a family guy. You know, to see him doing well, it's good to go and see. But yeah, he was a terrific signing.
As you said, Dumbarton were the best part-time team in the country at that point. Did you quite enjoy having almost, maybe not quite free range to pick who you wanted out of all the different part-time teams across the country, but you could go to clubs lower down the league and say, look, we've got this opportunity for you, best part-time team, going to Ibrox, Tannadice, whatever.
Yeah, it was. Use it as an advantage. Yeah, you certainly do that. You know, part-time players in Scottish football, the kind of same ones will attract 3 or 4 clubs at kind of high end of League One, maybe the ones in the Championship. But what we try to do as well is we try to attract players coming out the Premier League, like Mark Brown. We signed Mark Brown, for example, coming for the careers he had. So we try to get players that the part-time you could cope with that, but also the ones coming down from the kind of Premier League full-time that their next move was part-time, and it was an easy sale. And you're right, now you're speaking to players and you're talking about where do I go next season. So I'm talking to Stranraer, I'm talking to S1E5, and you can offer going to Ibrox, Easter Road, the places like that. You know, it is a no-brainer, and use it to the advantage. You know, because generally kind of part-time players all play for about the kind of same wage structure. There's probably 5 or 6 clubs that maybe pay a wee bit more, but they also pay the kind of same money. So location's a big factor as well. I mean, certainly having training based in Glasgow, which at the time was a big thing for us. If we trained down at Dumbarton, for talking sake, or Helensburgh, we probably wouldn't be attracting the same players coming from the kind of Dundee area, you know. So that was always a big thing, but the selling point was it, like, no doubt about that.
I was looking back just there, so obviously your first game in charge in the league was that 2-1 victory against Hibs, where Gregor Buchanan scored after 3 minutes. Now listen to some of the names in this Hibs team from that day: and David Gray, Paul Hanlon, Liam Fontaine, Lewis Stevenson, Marvin Bartley, Fraser Chris, Scott Allen, Dominic Malonga, Jason Cummings, a certain John McGinn, Sam Stanton and Martin Boyle were their subs that day. I mean, that must have been one of your proudest days in football.
It was. I think after 3 minutes I looked at Stephen and think, that's a good job, this is quite
easy.
But you're right. I mean, the players you've mentioned there, you know, I mean, to win that game, and I can remember it, I mean, to compete the way we did, it was terrific. And then the following week, you maybe touched on, I went to Love Street and won again, and I said to the chairman, passed him in the corridor at Love Street at the time, or St Munn Park. There was like 6 points out of 6, and I say, that's not to win, boys, need to put the players. I says, yeah, if we keep going like this, I say, you might be skint come Christmas. He's like, don't worry, just keep winning games. But I think we got back to reality the third game when we took a wee bit of a scalping, could say, down here, you know. But yeah, the first game is always, I think as a manager to get a new club, the first one's always the most important one, you know. And starting off with a win against a team like that was terrific.
How important at the start of a season as well? I know it's a new job in that situation in a higher division, but I've always just been a big believer of first game, especially at home, you just want a good result just to set the tone for the season. Do you think that's important?
I think it is. I think that if you ask any manager, I think the very first game of the season, whether it be a new club or the start of another season, I think the first one's always an important one. I think it's getting points in the board early doors. We always said that, and I'm sure Steve has said it as well. It's that season, get points in the board, because what you don't want to go and do is lose your first game, lose this next game, and before you know it, you're thinking we need to try and get points to the board. Then even as early as on as that, people can start at your fingers, you know, and think we need to try and get a win. So I think it's key and massive going forward that when you do start the season, especially in your club, you win your first game, and we're glad to be done that.
There's a couple of players from that sort of time that I want to touch on there. The first is somebody who again was a phenomenal player for you in Gary Fleming. Now I love a Gary Fleming story, but also that East Fife game a couple of weeks before, I think Suns lost on penalties or something in the League Cup. Gary got subbed and he wasn't too best pleased. The following week he got the armband for the game against Hibs. He played really, really well. Talk me through that relationship you had with Gary.
Gary was first and foremost a terrific player. I don't think Gary even realised the kind of ability he had, and certainly as a manager and being about football, we do things that I'm thinking, wow. Then other things thinking, is that kind of the same Gary Fleming? Is he a twin? But he loved this club, and when you're starting off a new club, I remember the start of the season and things, it wasn't quite right. I think we played Queen's Park at Hampden as well in a game, and we're sitting looking at it and think this is just not right, or something, it's just not clicking, it's what we're trying to across, maybe the players not kind of taking it on board. But we always knew Gary was a big influence about the club, and it was a no-brainer to make him captain. And as I said, he was terrific in my time here. It's probably, looking back, it's probably one of the hardest decisions that I had to make was when letting players go, and he's one of the slights over, but you have to do what's probably right for the club going forward. And Gary's a wee bit older again, and at some point he's going to have to leave Dumbarton, but you look back and think, should I have done that, should I not have done it, and and you've been on and played it's been Allo as well, so terrific lad, and it's I just think as a player and as a captain he was no-brainer for me.
I don't think Gary's penalty from that game at Hampden's came down yet.
Well, I know, I think that's what kind of annoyed me at that time. I'm thinking, how can I miss that?
Must be just about the only penalty he missed that as well, because he was really, really good.
He scored some terrific goals, the one that, to keep us up in the first year at St Mirren here, it was terrific, and as I say, there's only a number of players that can do that. People think that's an easy thing, but it's not an easy thing, but he could do that on a regular basis, so no, he was a terrific guy and a good captain for me.
Only man who could do it on a diet of hot dogs and super noodles as well.
If it works for Gary, listen, everybody's different, it's, the thing is now, I think everybody knows that football or any kind of sport going forward, you've got so much on social media. You can go on an app and tell you what to eat, when to eat. You can go on an app and tell you what to train, when not to train. I mean, Gary was a player that probably came my era. It was a case of, right, in the morning, is a fry up for breakfast and go and play football when it works, so why change it?
Another player from that time who moved on very quickly was Andy Graham, who was obviously Dumbarton's captain the season before. Talk me through what happened with Andy Graham and why he left.
It's one of the ones again that it's when you come in and you look at when my very first thing when I came in was to offer players contracts, so I hadn't met any players, I didn't know them, and I had to start letting players go, and I knew Andy through connections at Morton, the big player here, but we signing Gregory Cannon, we wanted to try and get a strong squad, and Andy kind of fell out of the team at the start, and I can remember the game at Queen's Park and the game we were talking about earlier he played, and it just didn't look as if he was enjoying it, so with a chat and an honest chat, and he wanted to keep on playing. I couldn't let us see any players, can't guarantee it. He still thinks best move on, and sometimes these things happen, but terrific servant, terrific career. I think that's one thing Andy had, was a very, very good career, and a fit guy, and again, sometimes people move out of football clubs that's people don't see happening, but these things, the manager, you make decisions, and some you get right, some you get wrong. Was
that quite hard for you? Because he was a fan favourite here, and obviously you're coming in as your manager, captain last season, and you've not got rid of him, but he's kind of fallen out the squad. That a hard decision for you to kind of making that first impression on the fans as well?
Yeah, always, but I think you have to make decisions not based on would it keep other people happy. Andy wasn't happy, I can understand that, because he wasn't playing the team, he was a captain, he wasn't playing, so I can get why he was like that, and you don't want unhappy players. You don't want that in the dressing room that will no fester. I fester on let, and she's not happy. Another guy in the dressing room he's really tight with, and he's not falling out of the team. And if we know that the dressing room starts getting split, and the dressing room's got to all together, and Gary just Andy will express that he wanted to leave, and a hard decision for the club as well. I mean, it's I spoke to the chairman about it. He's like, really, and it's like, look, if the player wants to move on, he wants to move on, and I no doubt if he'd stayed, he'd played a big part of it, but at that time he just wasn't playing a team, wanted to move on. Maybe he thought that a new manager coming in, it's time for him to move on as well. So these things happen in football, but it's difficult when it's and fans have always got their favourites, and I get that. I love football, and I'm going to watch teams and I've got favourites, and I remember watching games thinking, how's he getting taken off, and he should be playing for the start. It's just you see it, as a manager, how you see it, you have to stick with that.
obviously form hit a wee bit of a dip. I can't believe that we've spent so much time talking about a 1-0 League Cup or whatever it was, defeat to Queen's Park. Of all the games, it had to be that one. But one game that I want to touch on, form obviously dipped off a wee bit after that phenomenal start, but the game, the 3-3 draw with Wraith Rovers here, I think it was about November time, when Willie Gibson came on and in the space of 12 minutes won a penalty and set up 2 goals. First of all, your most inspired substitution of all time, but secondly, what are your memories from that game? Because that's something that always gives me hope, even when we're 3-0 down.
It's one of the games that, you know, it's a strange way when you're down, but you think, if we can get one, we're not really out in this, because we're still in the game. It's not second half, but you can sit and watch the game and think, a team's not going to score here, and you think, if we can get one, we'll get maybe rally his troops. And Willie Gibson, I've worked with him obviously a couple of times, and hopefully does he do this today and we can bring you on it.
I was going to say, have a wee word in his ear.
But it can change a game and like that, and getting the goal and it just basically galvanised the whole club at that point, because we were down, you know, we had a bad run. You know, and you start thinking, when's next one going to come from? And it just needs a wee spark, and he gave us that. But he gave us it so many times, really, you know, and he's a player that can do that. And again, although it's a terrific career, but again, it's a player that stayed and moved on, and that's what happens. But it was a crazy game. You know, and but the football was full ups and downs, and that season was like that.
And how good is it as a manager when you do make substitutions like that? How good is it?
Well, it's great. Can you pat yourself, you pat the back, you know, because a lot of people criticise you for the ones you get wrong, and you get a lot of them wrong. You know, you make a substitution, people say, "What him off for?" and it doesn't work, then you also criticise.
But look at us here, you remember the good ones, don't you?
You always do, people always say, "No, mate, if there's a bad decision, it always comes from your assistant manager. It's not the manager. The good ones come from the manager."
I'll remember that, yeah.
That, we were talking about inspired substitutions, but that January you made an inspired signing in Christian Nadi, who went on to score 7 goals in 12 games. Now, Chris is a Sheffield United fan. Chris has seen Christian Nadi score the winner against Arsenal. But talk me through working with Christian, because he must have been one of your best signings in terms of an immediate impact. And just what that team lacked was that focal point and that.
Yeah, we knew that getting into the kind of second half of the season, that we really had to strengthen in certain areas, you know, and it's no, it's one game of football, you've got to score goals. I thought we were competing well enough in a lot of games, but you're playing against clinical championship teams, full-time teams, big teams. They'll kill you off, you know. And if you're certainly if you've not got a lead in the game, then it's hard to protect it. You know, but Christian, we knew of his career, obviously, where he went, you know, and spoke to his agent, had a chat, and we knew it'd been no-brainer to sign him. We knew he would do really well because he's got that presence in the park, you know, and you see him, and he scores some terrific goals. I think a hat-trick towards the end of the season against Cooney South, possibly. Alloa. It was like a kind of header and a volley.
Perfect tactic, I think.
It was terrific, you know, and great to work with, you know, a lovely guy, you know, and that was probably one of the signs that I did get right.
Towards the end of that season, then, Suns were maybe they're never fully safe from relegation, but it always felt like they'd have enough to get over the line. Was that you and the squad's feeling as well? I thought, you know what, we're going to do this, and that, I guess the big example of that was the game against Hibs here again. Suns beat them again. This time John McGinn started and Kevin Colley rolled them to score the opening goal. But there was always the sort of feeling that this team had enough that it was going to stay up. Yeah,
during the course of the season there'll be stages you're thinking we've not got enough in the squad to try and see it through, but we're always confident that the players and the way the dressing room was, everybody was together. They were training really well. There was never any issue in terms of training, and you just knew that if we could just get them with one or two signs that made a difference, then we'd be able to stay up. So towards the end, we're always confident that we'd have enough in the locker, but it's always in the last couple of games. It always seems to be the last 2 or 3 games before you can actually get yourself. It was never like 5 or 6 games you were safe. And then you're looking at kind of fixtures, and you're looking at the last 3 or 4 games, you're thinking, sitting on here in minutes when you get points, but you know, I had no doubt at all that we'd enough to stay up, you know, and delighted my first season championship managed to do that.
Was that the goal that season, just to stay up as a part-time team in that predominantly full-time league?
Yeah, look, I think when a part-time team in championship, I think the first port of call is to stay in the division. There's no doubt about that. I'm sure if you asked Dick Campbell that, even last season we've been nearly won a league. Every time I asked him, he said, no, we want to try and get to 38-40 points to make sure of that. Anything above that then you can look at, but you're ambitious, you know, the club were ambitious, the chairman is wanting to try and get, I think Ian was close to playoffs if never got them before me, so they wanted to try and get to top 4 and top 5, and that was the goal, was to try and get there, but it was tough, you know, there's no doubt it was tough, you know, but I think to stay in it and give ourselves another year in the championship was a goal. And then hopefully learn from things that maybe went wrong, and then try and build the club again, and that obviously got us into the following season.
And do you try and lean into that sort of underdog status, in the dressing room? Do you try and get that mentality into the boys?
Absolutely, yeah. Absolutely. The boys knew that. Boys knew the game they're going to. They want to give it again a part-time team. They'll be fit, and if they'll lose last 20 minutes, they'll lose their legs. And that was always the kind of people thought part-time teams, but I don't think any team ever ran us over the park in terms of legs. But you're right, you use that to your advantage, and I've always seen underdogs doing well. Everybody wants to see the lower team doing really well. You only see a couple of goals with Darvel and Aberdeen, the whole country was kind of wanting that to happen. So you use that to your advantage, yeah.
The following season, I've written down my notes, was very much a season of two halves, and we were talking about it in the way in. The second half of that season was, we were saying possibly, I think you said it was one of your favourite Dumbarton
team. Yeah.
But we'll start with the first half of the season, and that obviously, I guess it culminated around the Bonnyrigg game. But the one I wanted to start on is something that's maybe not been touched on a great deal as well. Alan Martin obviously came in that season and was phenomenal, but Jamie Ewings had won his place back the previous season and then picked up a really serious injury that basically meant that he never played a full season again. He came onto your backroom staff, but how gutted were you for Jamie, because he was hugely popular and obviously someone you had a lot of time for as well?
Great time from you, you're right, it's popular every day at the club, and you can see that right away when my very first meeting, my first took the job, I met all the players, and the very first time I'm thinking, I said that to Faz, I like James, I get a really good lad, a good feeling about him, and again, he loved the club. I mean, he loved this club the same as Andy, Gary Fleming. They really loved their club, and gutted for him because he's a very good goalkeeper. And also got in the back of my staff as well and just doing all the well for himself, but so I gutted for him, but Alan Martin did a terrific season. It was excellent, and probably if somebody says to me about the second half of the season, you probably said it perfectly at the two halves. So the first half was, but the second half was terrific, and I say to people, and a lot of people don't know that, and you don't, but that season we were the highest goal scorers away from one whole division.
Yep. Yeah.
And nobody can believe that. The part-time team away from the highest goal scorers in that division. You look at teams around that, terrific, and that's probably the best team that I had that finished off that season. But unfortunately, about 6 or 7 of them, maybe loans moved on to other clubs, and you'd have to start again.
We'll talk about the sort of the darker part of that season first, which was obviously culminated with that game at Bonnyrigg. Was that your lowest point in management? Was it one of your lowest points in football? Talk me through that time.
Yeah, it was, but we didn't deserve to get through the tie in both games. I said that to players.
They should have won it up there, right?
We're very lucky to get a replay out, and I said to the players in the dressing room, I says, look, he's a very lucky group of players to get another chance to the Scottish Cup because he should be out. We never turned up, and everything we knew was going to happen. We told the players that look, they're underdogs, they're a good junior side, they're going to come at these, then the park will be different to what you're used to. You won't go to Easter Road, you only go to Tannadice. It was difficult, and we never get going, and very lucky, but I thought in the second game I was like, enough to get by the tie, and we should have enough to get by the tie, there's no doubt about that at all, but you could just see when the goal that they got, and the guy could probably hit it again, it would never go back in, it's, and after the game it was low, and it was low for me, the players and the club. As chairman Alan Jardine, who I got on really well with, good relationship with him, he put a lot of his own money into the club, a lot of people didn't see, and to give him something back as a coupling, because that's where we get finances in. And he left, when they scored they left, and I was gutted for him because he wasn't here after the game, he had to get away, and I text him and says, look, you want me to leave, I'll leave, because that's not acceptable. And he said, I'll speak to you tomorrow. I was night shift that night, went home and I went to work, and he's just scratching his head, you're thinking that's not enough. Faz was like listening, and Faz is always upbeat, he says, listen, we'll get this right. Came back down the next day and spoke to the chairman, apologised, said, look, we're not good enough, and he said to me, he says, I said, you want me to leave? And he says, no. He says, do you believe you can still turn this around? I says, I believe even more now that I'll get this right. And he says, get some players in and make it right, and that's what we've done. So I think the following week we won at Falkirk Key we played, I think it might have been, and Gary Fleming scored 2-1, I think it was, and different was Rosie again, and I'm glad I did. I don't like flinging a towel in, but you will low, there's no doubt about that, you will low, but I say we bounced back great.
You've spoken about obviously getting players in, and it felt like that Falkirk game was the make or break moment. Like I think I felt that as a fan for how the season was going to go, because it was how the players were going to react to you still being in charge effectively. But in January you brought in Christian Nadi again, brought in Lewis Vaughan, Stuart Carswell, Tom Lang, Callum Gallagher and Ross McCrory. hey, as the January window goes, that's not too bad.
I think it's probably the best January I've ever had. If my Christmas present that year was, let's try to get some players in, and it came true. And the players you mentioned there, running off, that's quality players, and we had to work hard. The club backed it. It's thankfully the club made the finance available. Obviously Rangers with Ross McCrory, the Lewis Vaughan one is also people I already spoke about that when Ryan Stevenson was here and he wanted back full-time football, so he wanted to go to Raith Rovers. Gary Locke's manager at the time, and I said, listen, it's not up to it here. I said, I understand that full-time's more for you than the part-time. So he went on, but in the same conversation that day, we spoke to Raith Rovers and said, what have you got potentially coming our way? And Lewis Vaughan's name was mentioned, and I'm like, really? I was ready to I didn't want to jump in the phone and say, I'll take it. He says, let me look at it. Didn't put the phone off. I will do it. And what a player, but we had a great, I would have probably attacking 4 or 5 players then were a joy to watch, and then just let them go loose, and they were terrific. And I said that's what made the second half of the season, the players coming in, we finished like a train that year.
I was going to say, Jack, you'd obviously spoken on the way in, but that has been one of your favourite teams to watch, and the quality. So Alan Martin in goals, like McCrory, Daniel Harvey, we've not really mentioned, who's gone on to have a great career down south. Darren Barrett, Gregor Buchanan, then Carsey and Sam Stanton as the kind of holding two, and then the front 4, if you will, of like Nadie as the focal point, Robert Thompson on the left, Andy Stirling on the right, and then Lewis Vaughan through the middle.
It's another one about Sam Stanton was outstanding.
Don't get me started on Sam Stanton.
What a player, and it's when you get to work with players, but he's always classed as a winger.
Yeah,
and it's one thing you get players in, but you look at them and think, I thought also Ross McCrory was a right back. That was his position. We played middle of the park at Easter Road, and he marked John McGinn at the game. I remember it. And I remember the story because and I'll just touch on that because we spoke to Rangers on the Friday. I used to let the clubs know that the loan players are playing this Saturday and they can send. So I phoned Rangers and said, look, Ross McCrory's playing at Easter Road. If you want to send something, he's like, great. So we're going to play him at middle of the park, and it was like, that's right. I'm like, all right. Nah, we don't see him playing in there. I'm like, listen, football's full of opinions. I say, but we're going to play him in there. I say, because John McGinn's also get Hibs playing, we need to try and make sure he's taken care of. Ross had great legs, good football player, and he's immense that day. He was outstanding, but I always thought he was right. So Sam Stanton came, people said a winger, and quite quickly me fancy, he needs to be involved in the game. So I played him in the middle of the park, and it was outstanding. You're right, it was, but Robert Thompson was outstanding. The players going forward were just a joy to go and watch, but at the back as well, it's a terrific back four. You look at the players' experience here, down back. Gary Buchanan, obviously, and the 2 full-backs have been on to have great careers, so follow that to next year's team. I probably think it's like no way to live like that. That was the problem.
Thompson on the left was an interesting one as well. How did that come about? Because he came as almost a big target man, almost. Yeah,
but we always knew him because he played always through his career. He was at Brecon, so we always knew his career and always played against him. And he was always a handful because he was just a good football player, very intelligent. But a lot of people play as a part of 3, but we done it because one, he understands the game. To play players a position, you've got to understand. We go back and forward. But it was so much an outball for us on that side, he gave us that opportunity to go down that way side because his ability, and Andy's still a totally different player the other side, but he is the same, but he scored a lot of goals from that area of the park, it wasn't out there, it wasn't contributing, he was still scoring goals, but again, a terrific lad and great guy to work with.
I've always said that if I won the lottery, and I've said that a few times in the podcast, if I win the lottery and take over Dumbarton, the first thing I do is going to sign Sam Stanton, just give him to the manager, just like, there you go, enjoy.
I don't think any manager would turn around and say, I don't want that. I think they would say, that's fine.
No, but they wouldn't step your hand off straight away. They'd obviously just go,
I'll phone you back. Yeah. The Lewis Vaughan rule is what we call it now, playing it cool around that. But as you said, the variety that you had, so you've got Andy Stirling on one wing, and you've got Robert Thompson on the other, then you've got Christian Nadie up front, and then you've got Lewis Vaughan in behind them. Like, that's 4 completely different threats. As a defender, you would be looking at that and thinking, like, if I mark the big guy out of the game, they're just going to stick the wee guy on me.
No, it was, I said, we set them up to just go and play in the forward areas, and that's why I said earlier we scored so many goals away from home, because teams have come at us. We had them a break, and the ability you've got there, and then Sam Stanton playing it through Lewis Vaughan, who's slitting balls through Andy Stirling, Robert Thomas and Nadie. we're just picking teams off, and every away game was a joy because teams were coming right at us, as you would probably do as a home team, and we just kept picking them off. And I remember a game at Tannadice towards the end, it basically the one that kind of kept us up. And there's so much a threat. That day, every time it going to score goals, I actually remember because obviously Leeds was probably at that time, and Alan McCoy's phoned. The game finished, and put on the phone. He's like, in his typical McCoy, he said, "Me man," he says, "your team are magnificent," he says, and Andy Stirling, what about him? And it was, well, we're just so good. You're just so good to watch, and I wished I kept that team up because we'd probably maybe things would be different the following year. But your success becomes your downfall. I mean, the players that you mentioned, also loans go back, but they all left. And then Robert Thompson went away. He went full time. Andy Stirling went back full time, and you've lost a chunk of your team, and we never really replaced the players.
Here's one of the great unanswerable questions of all time. If you'd kept that team together, maybe added a couple of bodies over the summer, but kept all the loan players, a dream scenario, could that team have challenged for the playoffs the following season?
No doubt on that. Even if you kept 2 or 3 of them and kind of built round about that, we just lost too many. It was as simple as that. Out of that, you basically took away your front 5 players, and that's another year. Players got older for another year, and we really struggled after that in terms of to recruit the same type of player because the players weren't available. But I think any team with the players going forward would have been confident, but unfortunately it wasn't to be.
What's it like in that situation when you're having those good times and you see that player? Is it always in the back of your head? You're just like, you've got X amount of loan players, if so and so keeps playing well, someone's going to be looking at him. Can you almost like foresee the breakup of a team if you're doing well, especially as a part-time team in a full-time league?
No, you're right. It's you can see it coming. I knew it was coming. I knew the players that their tennis critical managers speak, so managers know what other players are looking for, and managers say, "Look, we're really interested in Robert Thompson for next season." We're talking to it when it went to Morton. So, you're right. That is the biggest problem, But I always say to players, and Robert Thompson, it's a big decision. He said, "I love it here." Andy Stirling, the players that left, and I says, "Look, we want to keep you, obviously, doesn't it? But you need to make a decision." And ultimately, full-time football is the biggest one. And I've never stopped a player bettering myself. I've never turned around and said to a player, "Look, stay here for another year because such and such." If there's an opportunity to bet yourself, I'll never ever hold a player back. And everyone that went full-time, I couldn't stop that. We couldn't offer full-time football. And full-time football is the best job. There'll be a player, a manager, a coach. It's the best job in the world, being full-time. It's something you love. And they get offered that, and you couldn't stand in their way.
That summer you were out of contract, and I remember we spoke on a podcast way before COVID was even a thing, so we're talking 4 years ago now, where you were out of contract, and I think you'd spoken to Neil Watt, and he said now is the time to basically leave, call it a day at Dumbarton. Your stock is so high, now's the time to call it quits.
No, you're right. A lot of people said that. And there's full-time team. I spoke to a couple, and those full-time teams were kind of floating about because they had back a 3 good season at Stranraer and 2 terrific seasons with Dumbarton. So you're talking about 5 years when things were going really well, and managers only get 5 years to things to go so well. So my stock was probably as high as it would ever be, but it was a big thing because I love being here. I love the people at the club, but I love the challenge of being the championship, and I wanted to manage as high as I could. I always says when I started off management, I'll try to go as high as I can. Wherever that goes in, obviously time would tell. But championship, obviously part-time manager, and the championship was as high as it can go. The next step's full-time. And also did a good job at the time, so that might never come round anyway. So Neil was right. He was looking at it as in terms of your stock. You leave, then as soon as something happens next season, you'll be the first person to get a job. And I'm like, I know, but I like it here. It's my passion. Football's what I want to do. And I don't regret it. The last season was always tough, but to get to the final and seeing so many people in Wales, it's that made up for everything. I just wish we could have delivered the cup final on the day. It wasn't to be, but that season had some highs as well. There's no doubt on that, but also ultimately some lows as well.
How soon the following season did you realise that this wasn't going to be like the season previous? It was going to be a bit more of a slog. It's going to be impossible for any club at Dumbarton's level to have replaced the sort of quality we spoke about. But was there a kind of moment where you thought, this is going to be a bit of a slog now?
I always thought it would have been alright. I didn't think we'd finish bottom, which we never. I always thought that we'll be kind of bottom 2 or 3. The biggest time was that when I realised that after we came back from Wales, a terrific everything the game plan we knew, because they were playing against a good side that was playing Europe. TNS were a terrific side, and so we knew we had to hang in, but we knew we had the players in the part on the bench that could cause them problems, and so the kind of way you see the game going, it went perfectly. Obviously scoring 2 terrific goals like that, but the enjoyment after that and seeing all the people down from Dumbarton and service stations, and it was honestly, it was what a night. That will never ever leave me. But we had to go to St Mirren on the Tuesday. I think we had so many games to catch up in, so we had to take. I didn't want to take the game because Jack was being quite clever, as you do as a manager. He says there'll be even the win it or beat, we'll get them on Tuesday because it'll be easy for us to pick your players up from that. So we had to take that game, and I think it was like 3 down after 10 minutes, something like that. I think we lost 5 or 6 that day, and then I knew that we weren't finishing bottom, and it looked like, well, so many games to play in, and the boys' legs were starting to go. You could see that you couldn't sign any players, so we had to figure that players that's trying to get suspended, get them booked, get them out the roadway, so we could try and finish the season strongly. Players that needed rest, had rest them. So we had to kind of give a few games. We're going to struggle here, and we just says, look, let's put our eggs in one basket and give it right for the last. If it's playoffs, let's get right for that, because we kind of knew by then it's the playoffs, especially after the cup final. Losing the cup final was. To pick your players back up from that was, you're never going to go and do that, you know. But we just had to get ready for the playoffs, you know, and we thought we'd have got enough to get through it, and we probably should have, you know. We're 30 seconds away, and if Liam Burke's ball goes over the crossbar and he shoots, we stay in the championship, you know, and unfortunately they're not a partner scored. But I kind of knew after the kind of cup final time that our legs were starting to go in the team.
If there's one player that season is remembered for, though, and your face is like, it's going to be a certain Dimitris Froxelius. Talk me about Froxy. How did he end up at the club? What did you first think when you saw him in training? Because natural ability wise, he was unbelievable.
Yeah, terrific. He's up there with Sam Stanton by ability, Lewis Vaughan ability, but Foxy's ability was never in question. He'd been in the country. I think he had Dunfermline doing some pre-season. I think he'd floated about a few clubs, so his agent been in touch, and we said, look, bring him out to train. And let's have a look at him, you know, and we could see right away, and the touch, the way he strike a ball, you're thinking his set plays, delivery. I mean, that's a big part of the game. I mean, set plays are a big thing now. I mean, he could be the cutting edge. We get a deal done. It was all difficult because he's kind of a different country to try and get a deal done, but we got one done. And it was terrific, you know. And he had a great guy behind him, and Sam Wardrobe at the time, who was up and down that line, you know, and that covered him because his strength wasn't coming back, his strength was going forward, so we just said, look, you just go forward and play, and worry about the defensive side, which a few players didn't like.
That's the best part about your maverick European attackers, is it not?
Absolutely, you know, and terrific, you know, a great lad, you know, and but some of the goals he scores, you know, the one was still the one in Wales, but he scored one at Dunfermline, and I was right behind it, and I remember looking at Jim Leishman, he was sitting there kind of hospitality and all that.
He got off balance when he hit that shot. He was leaning back. I mean,
the one in as I've seen a clip, I think every year that night there's always something on Twitter, and you see the goal going back in, and the way he hits it, you know, it's terrific to see, you know. But what a player, what a talent, you know, and I hope he's actually doing well.
It's the moment that the free kick is hit and Kyle Hutton turns round and goes like that. And that's Kyle Hutton, who's played in the Premier League, played like 70-80 games for Rangers. Like, he's played at such a high level, and he was just like, oh my goodness.
Danny Hanlon's goal was a terrific goal as well, you know. I mean, Danny had that ability as well, you know, and it's he's just unfortunate injury, or he'd have played a high level, and you know, but the two goals are terrific. But you're right, and the free kick leaves his foot. It's one of the ones I still remember it, and as soon as I went, right, I want to go.
I think he launched towards you after they scored.
He does.
Andy Dowie's already grabbed you. I must have kind of what was going on there,
because Andy Dowie was playing. I think we put him right back that night, and we're trying to get on the players to say, look, make sure the next 5 minutes there's nothing daft here. So he's running towards us. I think Janity comes out. I'm trying to shout to players, I say, listen, it's, because when you score goals like that, you can actually lose focus on the game, because you're right away, because all the players' families in the crowd, and my brother was up, and my friends were up, and you can see the excitement. I'm like, but I still got to finish this game off. There was maybe 10 minutes to go in the game or something. I can't remember what it was. So I'm trying to on the players, and you're thinking, right, I've still got some changes to make. And I think we picked Christian's. He was either starting, I can't remember, but I remember just kick your ball to him. You want that, and just kick it to him. Longest 10 minutes of my life, but in the final whistle went, what a feeling.
That was actually something I had written down, because every time I watch that goal, I just notice everyone's going mad, and then you and Andy Dowie are having this really serious conversation.
Andy knows the game, you know. He played a lot of games in his career and played at a good level, so he understood that probably, like, let's celebrate, but we've still got to finish this game off, you know. And I was just desperate to get one of the players to say, look, don't lose focus, you know. And I think they had one chance, I think maybe like TNS, I think they might score this year, but apart from that I thought we seen the game went really well, and we had a great night meals that night.
Let's enjoy it by being disciplined, right?
Neil Warnock, enjoy it, but enjoy it by being, word we can't say in the podcast, disciplined. Talk me through Cup final day then, because the first thing the thing that I always forget, and then I only remember when I read through, is that Froxy played for Cyprus the night before in a game that kicked off at like 7 or 8 o'clock at night, flew to Perth, was it the following day, flew to
Edinburgh.
Yeah, good. I think he had a connecting flight up to Edinburgh and then came and played in that game. As a manager, that's like your worst nightmare.
It was, because we knew we were going to have a tough game. Inverness were a good side, and the games were tight against them. So we knew obviously we're going to be a little bit against it, but we're really confident that we've got enough to go and win this. We thought their name's this trophy, we're going to go and win this. And when he came to say, look, I've been caught up, and I'm like, nightmare. And I said to him, I says, look, I'm never going to stop playing for your country. I said, but likelihood of I'm actually going to play, it's a friendly. We've at a cup final, spoke to his agent, he says, look, can we go and speak to the national coach and say, look, it's a big thing for the club, it's the first time club final for so many years. He's a top player, but he has to say, no, I want to play in my country, I couldn't stop that. Liam Burke was another one, he's away with Scotland, under 21s as well. So they two players were flying back, and it was like trains, planes, automobiles, with cars sitting waiting to bring them up, and also we knew we couldn't start them, but if anything happened on that road, they wouldn't have made the bench, and the build up to the game, everything was good, the training was good, we're in a good place, and we're really confident that, and I always remember people saying to me, we make a change to win a cup final, don't play for penalties or don't wait for Joe going. So I always in my mind is saying 2 minutes to go, it's written the stars, he's going to win this. He's going to go on. So, and ultimately it kind of cost us, because obviously defending wasn't his strong point, but it was what the club did it. They switched off and they got the goal. But yeah, it was a terrific day. I think seeing the supporters here, the support we had that day was terrific. I remember walking out the team looking and thinking, wow, if we could just win this. And we're gutted about the dressing room after. You could just, they missed the penalty. I'm thinking, right, this is it. Get them on. Let's go and win this. And we'd a couple of half chances. But I thought the longer the game went, they were legs were away. Kyle Hutton and Stuart Castle ran the show. Middle of part, they were terrific, and I think then Liam Burke comes on and we bring Fox on. I'm thinking, right, well, there's a Stonewall penalty. I always say, look at that, it's a penalty kick. It's a penalty kick, and other clubs that got that. And I was really confident last 50 minutes we're going to go and win this, and it was even the extra time. If we went the extra time, they'd won it, because their legs were going, and you could see that, but it wasn't being. It was we were all gutted.
How difficult was it to lift the players after that? Because the season had almost been building to that point, and like you said, I almost, and it sounds like a really daft, stupid thing to say, but it felt like everything was written in the stars for Suns to win that. The magic against TNS, going further back, the magic against Connors Quay with the last minute goal. We won't touch on Connors Quay because I can rant and rave about them a wee bit. The penalty save, obviously Froxy coming on and things like that. It felt, and then it was like, wait a minute, the fairy tale's over, and then it's boom, straight back to reality. And like you said, the games were coming thick and fast.
Honestly, the dressing room was after the game, the players were gutted, and all just sitting there, their heads down, and silence, and like, listen, guys, what a journey it was, but what can you say? You lost a cup final, and the way it was last kick of the. See, you lost cup final with 2 or 3-0. It's never acceptable. You can maybe have won quicker. Because the players knew they're right in this, the players knew their self, and even talking to him said, we thought we had that, we'd have won that. He says, we all thought the same, but listen, these things happen. But I think the players that arranged to have a night out that night, I think 1 or 2 went, says, listen, can I go in? Says, look, just go with your families and go and do it. Well, every plan is go and do it. And we'll see you at the game on Tuesday. And it was sore for weeks, and to try and put the players back up, it was difficult, but we gave it our best shot. We rallied, we tried to get over the line, and unfortunately we came short.
It was that playoff game against Alloa. Ross Stewart obviously scoring the leveller, who's gone on to have a phenomenal career down south with Sunderland. But that Alloa game, it was so strange because Suns almost felt comfortable in it for large spells, but then when you've only got a 1-0 lead, it's so dangerous.
Yeah, and anything, you're right, it only takes seconds to score a goal. It's Craig Barr was he's suspended for the second game, so we knew he was missing one. In hindsight, we maybe have got him booked earlier and missed the first one, play the second one. That'll register through your mind. But when Castle would go up at Alloa, and we could actually finished it off at Alloa that night with 2 or 3 chances at the end of the game that they were pushing to get back in it, and we 2 or 3 times we broke, we just scored, and that would have put it to bed. We're a bit more confident that we knew they came at us, because Alloa were a good side, a lot of good players there, players that we know. But we says, look, if we get one to finish it off, and I actually thought Kevin Nisbet scored the one at the header. Yep. Because I think we all celebrated, and I'm like, how come we're still going? I thought, and even at last, I remember Stuart Carr's made a challenge in the last couple of minutes and puts the ball forward, and I'm shouting corner. And you never started, but the boys tried to score the goal, and I remember Walter Smith, who's obviously another one no longer with us, coming after the game and says he hits it over the bar, wide, he's got to run and get it, put it down for the by kick, it's full time. Because I remember saying to the fourth official, how long ago, 30 seconds, I'm like, we've done it again. And the ball out the park, and even then, we still had chances to clear it, but the boys were dead in their feet there. And the boys about the box, and I remember leaving Ross Stewart's foot, I'm thinking, there's only one place that can going to go, and it's going to get in, and obviously that extra time, but we just knew it was unfortunate, wasn't to be, and that was it over.
A player you mentioned there who I completely almost forgot was at Dumbarton that season is Kevin Nisbet, who's gone on to do so well. But why do you think it didn't work for Kevin Nisbet? Because he's obviously gone on, he went on to Wraith in League One and scored a lot of goals, and basically everywhere he's been now he's been hitting 15-20 goals.
He was a young lad when he came to us on loan. You always knew Partick Thistle there was a player there, the ability, and terrific lad, and I think we used him at 4 or 5 positions because he was that good in terms of general play, but he also a strike and want to score goals, and even a chance of a penalty kick thing, maybe Queen South at home, and I think they've all ended up in the Carrick golf course which reminded them of, but terrific lad, and sometimes these things happen with players, they go on loans, and it's no effort. We play them every week we play them because he was a really good player, and just unfortunately he just didn't find the finishing touch, but he's not on now, terrific career, and he'll go on for Hibs again, no doubt, and make a right good career himself, but deserves it because he's a right good lad and a right good trainer and a great attitude, and deserves everything he gets.
Obviously at the end of that season, so relegation came and you stayed on as manager. Was that always the plan? Did you offer to resign? Was there pressure? What was the situation?
No, listen, I always said that at some point Dumbarton will come out of the Championship. It's the same as Arbroath will come out of it. All the part-time teams that's been in the Championship all come out of it. We to stay for kind of 3 years before my time as well. So Dumbarton now 5-6 years. What a terrific run for a part-time club to compete. But at some point you climb up the mountain becomes too big, you come tumbling back down, and it was maybe the right time for the club because a lot of people don't see the finances with it, and the club are struggling to get by, but to keep finding money to compete in the Championship, it's hard going. Because it's every corner you turn, the clubs try to get money to give you a budget to go and compete. So it was to come out of it, we says, look, let's take stock. Also a year left my contract at the time as well. I was really keen to get us back up, but I knew might have took 1 or 2 years to get back up, establish ourselves again in League One and build the club back up. So next time we go in the Championship, you can possibly try and stay a bit longer. That was always the plan, but listen, these things don't work out. We could do well with players. We wanted to recruit players that played in League One, knew how to win that division. Ross Forbes came in, and even a few others, Bobby Barr came in as well. So wanted wide players to play with 2 wingers and start letting supporters enjoy the team again, winning games every week, because it's tough when supporters are coming every week and it's a draw and a beat and draw and you're picking, they're just scraping points in the Championship. So I wanted to get a team that supporters would come and enjoy watching their team again, win a lot of games, and that was the season. It was just every time we turned a corner it was injury. I think we'd won sub a couple of games at the start of the season, so I knew then, I'm like, it's you're hoping then the board say, look, we've been here before with you, obviously the year with Bowenegg beating you, we turned it around. I think we just signed Dominic Thomas the week before, which obviously came finances that somebody helped out with, and I'm thinking we get him up and running, players coming back, it'll be fine, but that's the club made a decision, and although at the time I was like, let's try and get by this. It was the right time to part ways, it's, the club are good to me, and over the years I thought I was good to the club, and you move on, and hopefully the club can get back there.
Do you think after what you've done in the Championship you'd earned a bit more time than you got?
Yeah, but I understand too if it works. It's every manager will say that they deserve more time, but other people will say no, we've seen it, it's run its course. And listen, I respect the club and respect the board's decision. I says, look, just let me speak to my staff and the players. But it was tough to leave. It's when I had to dress me the players I brought down. It's a lot of players that I brought in. And it didn't work out. And when you lose your job, a lot of good people. Colin, the kit man, was terrific. All my staff were great with me. The players were all with me. I never lost a dress room or anything like that. We just struggled to get players fit in the park. It didn't work out. And you move on. It's good that the clubs obviously they're down again. But I'm sure Steve will build the club back up and hopefully get Dumbarton back where they belong. Your
interview after the Stranraer game, it was your last game in charge. Ironically, Stevie Farrell's Stranraer. So if we're talking about fairy tales, well, maybe that's not a fairy tale, but it felt like that was always going to be the thing that happened. But I still remember you saying, once this team gets up and running, they'll take some beating. And from the end of January until May, that Dumbarton squad, which Jim Duffy came in, and you only really signed one or two players who became starters, David Ferguson and Brian McLean towards the end of the season. Dumbarton lost twice between the end of January and the end of May. Do you think if you had stayed in charge that would have been, that's what you could see in training was coming, it was just going to take a bit of time?
Yeah, because Roy Lloyd was signed as well, which we couldn't get fit. He's had a lot of problems with his back, but we thought if we can get him up and running, players you can see coming back, and Dom Thomas has got a terrific sign. We knew that, and thinking just get through the next couple of weeks and we'll be fine. Always knew they'd be fine that year. There's too many good players in the squad. There's too many good professionals as well, so they'd never let it get down, and never been that. And it was good. Obviously, Jim is a good guy who I know well, and he came in, but it got the place going again, and kept him up. So, but as a manager, I always turn around and say that. But I said I respect the board's decision. I knew the supporters were kind of fed out with my comments that would be alright, but listen, my time here was terrific. I loved every minute of it. I wouldn't change anything apart from the cup final maybe.
I was going to say actually, just like last of all, sort of summing up for me is Rory Lloyd, because he was brought in as Dumbarton's marquee signing that summer, and obviously got a really bad injury. I mean, it was effectively a career-ending injury. That must be one of your disappointments, that you never got the chance to really see the Rory Lloyd who was scoring goals for fun in the Championship. Yeah,
and before the season before with St Mirren against us, it was terrific, and to push to get him, because we also wanted to try. I said I wanted to try and get in our team. I wanted the fans to come back and enjoy their football again. So when Rory Lloyd, goal scorer, play with wingers, a bit of pace in the team, and unfortunately to make a marquee signing, it didn't work out, and he was gutted as well. And Rory Lloyd was gutted because he really wanted to work, but he just couldn't get himself fit because of his back problems, so that was disappointing, but unfortunately these things happen.
And just lastly then, obviously you'll still be close with Stevie Farrell, you'll still keep an eye on Dumbarton's results. How impressed have you been by this season? Because that's again relegation and sticking with the same manager, and it's a matter of bouncing back.
It's good the club done that. I feared for Stevie last year because I came to the playoffs. I came to a couple of games last season. They went up through Edinburgh and they played, and even then I phoned them after it, and I'm like, I actually still think he'll win this tonight, because although you were poor that night, I thought Edinburgh City were poor as well, and I says get the first goal at Dumbarton, I says I think you'll beat them, but he suffered. I mean, the club could have made a decision and not kept him. They could easily made that decision. The Dumbarton were looking to get relegated that year. I know Stevie was proud of what he wants to achieve in football. He was disappointed, but it's good that the club gave him that. Stevie's a good guy, he's passionate, he loves the game, and I'm sure he's the right guy to get Dumbarton back to the best part-time team in Scotland, and hopefully can do that.
Well, fingers crossed you're right. Fingers crossed you're a lucky charm being here as well.
I hope so, I'm invited back.
Exactly. So no, Stevie, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks
it's
for having
much
me.
Appreciated.
Enjoyed it, thank you.
Cheers.